Hey guys, what's up? I'd like to wish a happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there, and be sure to remember to wish your father a happy Father's Day. So, now, tonight's movie is a film that is distributed by Trauma Entertainment, who they put out a lot of very good, low-budget exploitation films, stuff like the Toxic Avenger, Poultrygeist, Class of Nukem High, Blood-Sucking Freaks. Like, they've made and put out a lot of really good stuff. And this movie is also coming from Astron 6, who made the segment W in ABCs of Death 2, which was one of the best segments in that film. And they also made Manborg, which I reviewed about a year ago, and I really, really loved Manborg. And tonight is their attempt at making like a tribute to exploitation films. It's from 2011. It's called Father's Day. And now, while this is a trauma film, it's not connected to the other trauma film, Mother's Day, in any way. So, Father's Day is about this guy that wants to get revenge on a demon known as the Fuckman, or a monster like known as the Fuckman, and and he wants to get revenge on him because his father was killed by the Fuckman, by the Father's Day killer. And he teams up with some people, and they have to go on like some kind of epic journey to find this guy, this like monster, and defeat him. And I mean, from what I've heard, a lot of mixed things about this movie. I've heard I've heard some people say, you know, it's like better than like Death Proof and Planet Terror and Hobo with a Shotgun. I've also heard people say it's probably one of the worst attempts at making a tribute to exploitation films. But usually, you know, I enjoy films that are tributes to certain types of films, stuff like Gutterballs, which is a tribute to exploitation films, and 80s horror. Of course, the Grindhouse movies. I still have yet to see Hobo with a Shotgun, honestly. I haven't seen it all the way through yet. But I tend to enjoy these kinds of movies. Dead Hooker in a Trunk is probably one of the best ones I can think of. That's regarded as probably one of the worst. So this movie has a lot of potential, honestly. The only way I'm gonna find out if it lives up to that potential is if I watch it. So, without further ado, let's just sit back and watch Father's Day. So, the movie opens with an intro before the, like usual kind of trauma intro. Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz present a trauma team, production or whatever. And before that happens, we get like this intro from the channel, from the television station, the fictional television station Astron 6, which is the name of the group of guys that made this movie. That's like their name. That's what they refer to themselves as the writers and directors as. But this intro makes it out to be like it's one of those kind of like late night movie shows, like where they would show old horror flicks, at like midnight, like in Fright Night, when with the vampire movies being on late at night. But then we have this guy who's being gutted and eaten by another guy, and then a guy shows up and tries to kill him, but the killer escapes. He catches up with him and shoots him in the head, and then we get a title screen and these credits that are really like 70s, 80s kind of exploitation stylized, and it has kind of a grainy filter over it. And I don't know whether or not this film was actually shot on film. I mean, I'd like to say it is, because that would be really, really cool. But as far as I know, it's probably just a digital film with, a filter thrown on. But either way, it still looks, nice. And the intro's done in a kind of, well, the credits are shown in a kind of comic book style as well, which I really like that. Then we have another character who's introduced. He's referred to as Twink, and his real name is Andrew. And basically, what happened to him is he is in jail for the second time in 48 hours, and the reason he's in there is because he was found in a motel room with another man, and the guy was dead, and they think he did it. And Twink's father had actually been killed by the Father's Day killer the other night as well, which like that night that he was in prison, which you know, he's just kind of bummed about that. And it turns out that Twink is a gay character. I mean, that it was kind of obvious by the fact that his his name, what they refer to him as is Twink. But he's also a gay prostitute as well, which, I mean, you know, it still adds something to the characters. The acting in this movie, it's okay. It's nothing fantastic. It's nothing award-winning. Same with the writing here. It's pretty silly and stupid and kind of unfunny on purpose. And honestly, I kind of like movies like this. The dialogue, you know, ranges, but usually it falls usually into the more silly side of things. The characters are, you know, likable and goofy. They don't have a ton of depth to them, but I at least liked most of them. The effects in this movie were almost all practical, and they were all really good. Anything that's like CG that they used is pretty bad, but that's kind of like a trait with Astron 6 after watching their segment for ABCs of Death and ABCs of Death 2 and watching Manborg. It seems like when they do, you know, backgrounds for stuff, they usually do green screen and they make it look bad. Whether or not it's on purpose, I honestly still think it makes the movie a lot more entertaining. Much like the cheesy, like, CG gore effects in each of the killer. Like, yeah, they suck, but it adds a little more humor to the film than, you know, there would be if there wasn't CG gore. The camera work and lighting and sound mix and music, they're all really, really good here. Nothing is really out of place. There's some times when the lighting is a little stylized, kind of like in Creepshow. And speaking of Creepshow, there's that segment in Creepshow, Father's Day, which is probably probably one of my favorite segments in the movie. I don't know why I'm mentioning it, probably because this movie's called Father's Day, that segment's called Father's Day, it's Father's Day today, and Creepshow's an amazing horror film. But, anyway, the lighting kind of gets stylized like that. The pacing isn't really good, and the film lacks a good amount of tension, but it still has an exploitation feel that I really like. There's still there's still enough going on to keep it from getting boring. There's still enough violence or just exploitation antics, silly stuff, nudity, weird situations, you know, stuff like that. There's enough to go around to keep the film entertaining. It's one of those movies that if you really want to enjoy, you have to turn off your brain for a bit and just, you know, sit back and enjoy the ride. Although, and the movie's original, I'll give it that. It's very original. But it kind of does the thing that Ryan Nicholson's films do, the films of Ryan Nicholson do. Ryan Nicholson made Gutterballs, Hanger, and Torched. Those are the three that I've seen from him. And his movies are mostly horror comedies. The problem is he likes to do, you know, his films are usually tributes to, like, the slasher genre or a certain subgenre of horror or just exploitation films in general. And they usually come out like, yeah, there's some genuinely funny moments, and it's definitely a pretty funny, goofy movie, but then at the same time you got these scenes of very, very explicit violence and gore that are like very serious scenes and stuff that's kind of that seems out of place, but honestly, when I watch these movies, it kind of works for me. You know, it's really graphic and brutal and kind of hard to watch at times, but at the same time, it's really funny and goofy, which is kind of like this film, except not as brutal. On the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu, and 10 being something like Brain Dead. Father's Day is probably a 9. It gets kind of like August Underground-esque when it comes to the torture scenes, which there are a few of. There's lots of blood and gore and brutal kills in the film. Although I like this movie, I'll be honest, I still dozed off around 30 minutes in, and I had to rewind it a bit. Which sucks. Although this wasn't the movie's fault, this was my own fault because I just got drowsy and I decided, hey, let's lay on my side and watch this because I want to be comfortable. Knowing that, you know, usually when I lay on my side to watch, and I watch a movie, I usually fall asleep. But it's not as good as Manborg. I'll tell you that. Manborg is probably still my favorite Astron 6 movie. Or my favorite thing that I've at least seen them do. But honestly, it's still pretty good. It's still worth a watch. And I mean, I definitely say, I mean, I can't really fully recommend the movie. Honestly, it's probably the worst like exploitation tribute film I've ever seen, but that necessarily isn't a bad thing. Just because it's the worst doesn't mean it's the worst ever. Just doesn't mean it's the worst movie ever made. It just means it's not the best. It's not up there with, you know, Grindhouse and Dead Hooker in a Trunk and Gutterballs with the tribute films to exploitation films. It's not up there with those. It's at the bottom, and I mean, just because it's at the bottom, just because it's probably the worst exploitation tribute I've ever seen, does not mean it is a terrible movie. It's still genuinely entertaining and graphic, and I definitely say it's worth watching at least once if you're interested. I'd probably have to give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, like 7 out of 10. It's entertaining enough, I'll give it that, but it's nothing fantastic, I guess. The number of times I've used fantastic in a review is impossibly high. So anyway, guys, if you liked the video, like my channel, be sure to like this video, favorite it, whatever you want, and maybe subscribe perhaps. I would really, really appreciate that. And check the links in the description below. There are links to things like my Tumblr, Twitter, all that, Facebook. All that is in the description below. Hey there, kids. Do you want to get cool stuff in the mail like this? Or this? Or even this? Well, then subscribe to Horror Block today. Have you ever wanted to do cool cosplays like this? Or even this? Well, now you can. Subscribe to Moonchild Cosplay on YouTube, and you can see all her tutorials on how to do cool stuff like this. Do you want to get cool horror and exploitation film t-shirts like this? Or this? Or this? Well, then go to RottenCotton.com to check out all of their premium t-shirts.